is probably cold, wet, and windy wherever you are outside. And I've got some cold, hard facts that aren't going to make you feel any warmer on today's Locked On Guardians, but we're going to wrap it up with some hot and juicy draft data that's going to warm your heart for months to come.
You are Locked On Guardians, your daily podcast on the Cleveland Guardians, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, everybody? I'm Justin Latta, your host of Locked On Guardians. For today, solo show, Jeff Ellis gets the night off for filling in for me last week while I was sick. Before we get rolling into some of these cold, hard facts and that hot, juicy data, I want to let you know that today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. $150 if your team wins. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. And you'll hear throughout the show that that deal is getting even juicier. Let's start off with some sad facts. So we haven't really had a chance to talk about Michael Brantley retiring a couple days ago, even kind of shoving some other content into the show that we needed to get to, wanted to get through, and we still have some more of that to go. But we didn't want to neglect Michael Brantley retiring, one of the all-time greats in Cleveland, on the field and off the field in the clubhouse. Very well respected and liked, a team leader, and really just an all-time great story. I mean, if you're not familiar, obviously Cleveland acquired him in 2008 from Milwaukee Brewers, almost at the end of 2008 technically, where the condition of the trade was, so first it was Matt Laporta was the centerpiece of that deal. Speaking of sad outfielders, we're going to revisit here today. And Rob Bryson was in that deal, reliever who I can't remember if Rob Bryson made it to the majors or not. If he did, it was a very brief cup of coffee. I can't remember if there was another pitcher in that deal. I feel like there was another pitcher in that deal. But the player to be named later in that trade had a condition where if the Milwaukee Brewers got to the playoffs, that the Guardians would get to select their player to be named later, or they agreed on a couple players, and Cleveland's request was Michael Brantley. If the Brewers failed to make the playoffs with CC Sabathia in 2008, they would have gotten third baseman Taylor Green, who I don't know if he ever made it either, but I know he tore both ACLs in his time in professional baseball and never really panned out as a player. And I believe he is a scout now for the Brewers or someone else. But boy, how things turned out there, because Michael Brantley goes down as one of the best Cleveland Indians ever in terms of outfield, and certainly of the last 20 years, which it's a really sad place to look. And we're going to go there. So if you're watching on YouTube, again, thank you for making Locked On Guardians your first listen today and everywhere you get podcasts. We hope you're watching on YouTube, because we always put up some good stats for you to follow on YouTube. But if not, I'm going to read some of them off here. So Michael Brantley finishes, his Cleveland career with a nice batting line at 295, 351, 430, 20.1 Fangraphs wins above replacement, 87 homers, 118 steals, and 114 WRC plus. Pretty good. In terms of WAR all time for Cleveland, and this is F-WAR among outfielders, he is 14th all time among outfield. And that's with a pretty ugly defensive rating, because obviously defensively, Michael Brantley did get progressively worse through the years. He always had a good arm, but never really had a whole lot of range. And obviously injuries sapped a lot of that later in his career. But 20.1 Fangraphs wins above replacement, 14th of all time, right behind Shin-Soo Choo, who we haven't had a chance to mention this offseason, who it was reported is going to retire from the KBO after the 2024 season. So he's going to play one more year in the KBO. Good for him. He is right above Michael Brantley in terms of wins above replacement in Cleveland outfield history at 20.5, despite the fact that he played almost half the games. He had 685 games as a Cleveland Indian, and Michael Brantley played over 1,000. And obviously a lot of that defensive rating helps out Shin-Soo Choo. Technically had a negative defensive rating for Cleveland, but it wasn't as bad as Michael Brantley. Choo also had a great arm. I think he was a little better of a defender, though, hit for a little bit more power in his time with Cleveland, although he had close to the same amount of home runs as Michael Brantley, and like I said, almost half the games. Brantley at 87, Choo at 83, but easily two of the best three outfielders Cleveland's had in the last 20 years. I think you know who the other one is. It's Grady Sizemore, who's 8th all time in FanGraphs wins above replacement at 30.4. It's an ugly list, man. It's so ugly. Kenny Lofton's in 4th, the most recent. The should-be Hall of Famer at 43.1. Disgusting that he's not in the Hall of Fame. Manny Ramirez is 7th, so he's right above Grady Sizemore. Grady was so close to passing him, and obviously never happened because of injuries. But Michael Brantley was a team leader, and even when he couldn't play in the playoffs, devastating to think back about. Truthfully, that he couldn't play in the 2016 World Series of the playoffs. I really think that a healthy Michael Brantley wins that World Series for them. Probably more likely they win the World Series with a healthy Cookie Carrasco because they ran out of gas pitching wise. But Michael Martinez was the last hitter in the World Series in 2016, and that could have easily been Michael Brantley. Very unfortunate. Shin-Soo Choo, that was the one of those two trades from the Mariners in 2006. I can't remember if it was Eduardo Perez, if it was Ben Broussard. They traded their first base platoon for two guys that ended up being fixtures for them quite a long time, as Dribble Cabrera and Shin-Soo Choo, who had Tommy John before he made his debut with Cleveland. But, he would have been a good asset in the 2007 playoffs, but he was hurt. So that would have been a nice piece for them to have instead of they were running Trot Nixon in right field, who, was a veteran presence that they needed for the Pies that year and all that stuff. But Choo was a great player for Cleveland too, in some very lean years, an exciting player, and also netted them Trevor Bauer, who was good for was decent for a couple of years. Obviously netted him Brian Shaw, who's been instrumental and played a big role here among some other guys. So that trade really panned out well for them. But two very respected players, around the league. Choo, especially in the KBO, who worked really hard and had really good skill sets. And, I'll also never forget Michael Brantley, should have been playing in 2017 with that ankle issue. And then 2018, he was ready to go in the playoffs. And Cleveland was just kind of on its last leg at that point with pitching. That pitching was terrible that year. And the Astros were cheating. So there is that too. Just unfortunate, of course, Michael Brantley goes to the Astros. He did get a World Series ring. Never begrudge a guy for doing that, and has helped shape so many careers. I mean, shaped Francisco Lindor's career. Miles Straw, who I know isn't everyone's favorite, talks very highly of him, but just a guy who's had a huge influence on a lot of people's careers, and didn't always have the most fun answers for the media. He was not a guy big on doing interviews publicly. But just a very well-respected guy in the clubhouse. I'll be curious to see if Brantley goes into coaching at all. He's very quiet. I know he retired because he wants to be at home with his kids and his family, and he's been away too long. But man, his dad was his kind of hitting coach, and guys who are good at things like this, like Eddie Murray was a terrible hitting coach. Obviously, he's a Hall of Famer, one of the greatest hitters of all time, and he was a terrible hitting coach. I don't know if that was his attitude or just because it was hard to communicate when you can do things. There's always that saying that says that those who can't do teach, and Michael Brantley certainly could do. So I don't know how that'll translate to teaching. It didn't work for Eddie Murray, but Michael Brantley's a different cat. So who really knows? But just looking at this list of outfielders, man, it's ugly. Like I said, Choo and Brantley are 13 and 14 all time in terms of outfield. FanGraphs wins above replacement. If I'm looking at 05 to 2023, which Grady, made his debut or made his full-time debut in 2005. Choo was 06 and Brantley wasn't until 09. But if you just go from 05 from that starting point, the top three are obviously Sizemore, Choo, and Brantley at 29.4, 25, and 20.1. Fourth is Casey Blake at 8.1. So there's three guys who have over 20 FanGraphs wins above replacement among the outfielders. And there's Casey Blake, who really didn't play the outfield all that much. He did when they brought in Aaron Boone for that one, sad year that was terrible. Lonnie Chisenhall, same case as him. Very similar player to Casey Blake. Played outfield late in his Cleveland career. Was not all that great, but he's up there with 7.9, but some of that was at third base. And it takes till you get to 6 that Stephen Kwan to get a more recent outfielder. He is at 7.4. So actually, as long as Stephen Kwan has a year in line with what he's done the first 2 years of his career, he will be Cleveland's 4th best outfielder among Fangraphs wins above replacement in the last 20 years. That's kind of sad. They don't have anybody in double digits in Fangraphs wins above replacement since Michael Brantley. So if Kwan has a typical Stephen Kwan year, he will reach double digits in 2024, and he will be the 4th best outfielder in this team's history, in the last 20 years of history. Looking at Major League Baseball outfielders in the last in that time period, so 2005 to 2023. Shin-Soo Choo actually finishes 20th at 34 Fangraphs wins above replacement. He is just behind Ichiro Suzuki, just ahead of guys like Starling Marte, Carl Crawford, and then so Shin-Soo Choo had a very underrated career. If you look at his time in the major leagues, Michael Brantley is 32nd in that time period at 28.8. As a 117 WRC plus in his career, so fantastic career for him. And ironically enough, Grady Sizemore, 33rd on that list since 2005 at 28.7 Fangraphs wins above replacement. So Grady Sizemore, Michael Brantley finished with nearly identical Fangraphs wins above replacement. 117 WRC plus for Brantley, 116 for Grady Sizemore. And again, if you're not familiar with that, 100 is league average. And that would indicate that Brantley was 17% above league average hitters during his time period in his career, and Sizemore was 16%. But certainly those guys had better years than that. That's just how it averaged out. But, good careers for those guys who lasted the last 21 years in Major League Baseball. Wish them both the best luck in retirement. And, Michael Brantley was a fan favorite. Grady Sizemore was a personal favorite when I was in high school. And one of these days, I really wish Cleveland would have an outfielder that surpasses both of them. And maybe we'll get to talk about one of them at the end of the show when we talk about some draft stuff. So stick around for that. Before we get to some draft stuff and some other news for players that'll be familiar, let's talk about the FanDuel deal that's going on right now. The NFL season is wrapping up. The playoffs are starting to heat up this weekend. Still time for you to get on the action with FanDuel, America's number one sportsbook. Right now, new customers of FanDuel get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place any $5 money line bet. So that's any $5 bet. So $150 in bonus bets, win or lose. So it's no longer just a money line bet. It's any $5 bet with FanDuel. If you are a new customer, you're getting $150 in bonus bets for you to use during the NFL playoffs. And now you don't got to use the money line, so you can do other things that the app has to offer, like live same-game parlays. You can find bets in the new Explore tab, and you can make a parlay in the Parlay Hub, which is the best way to find popular parlays to get those fun payouts. I also enjoy player props myself. That's usually where I play if I'm doing anything. And maybe I'll do something this weekend for the NFL games. We'll see. Haven't had a whole lot of luck. I didn't do very good in the college football playoffs and bowl season, but we'll see if we make some picks here this weekend in the NFL playoffs. But there's a lot more you can do in the FanDuel app. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to make your first bet an easy layup. FanDuel is an official partner of the NFL. All right. Well, we said a bit adieu to two all-time great outfielders in the Cleveland history. And are we going to be seeing a familiar face at Guardian Spring Training this year? I think Jeff and I have both been saying on the show, going back for a few weeks now, that the idea of Shane Bieber being traded probably just isn't going to happen. And a lot of it has to do with the fact that Cleveland is not getting the offers it likes, which makes sense. Again, a lot of teams out there, there's a lot of pitching on this market. Obviously, the guys who have signed so far have been very good. You also have Blake Snell and Jordan Montgomery on the market. There are other guys out there, too, that we've talked about that are going to sign at some point. Dylan Cease is still a trade option for some teams out there. There are good pitchers to be had out there, and they are all, unfortunately, the guys I all just listed are probably more popular than Bieber in terms of value, whether it's money or prospects, because as we know, Bieber coming off of another injured year, wasn't very good for the most part. and has 1 year left on his contract at this point. So the value just isn't there. That's all obvious. But, more moves are being made that makes it seem like there's just not a lot of suitors out there. The Reds went out and decided to take a gamble on Frankie Montas on a 1 year deal. They signed Nick Martinez, who, is probably more of a swing man in terms of starting and relieving right now. He's listed as a starter, but we'll see what happens there. But they've also got guys like Nick Lodolo and Brandon Williamson that could come up. There's Lyon Richardson as well. And they have Hunter Green and Graham Ashcraft, Andrew Abbott. So they have options. The Reds probably don't need to take a gamble on Shane Bieber, not for what it's going to cost, what Cleveland's going to want for Shane Bieber. So the Reds, who a lot of people picked as a obvious trade partner for Cleveland, are, probably out. And then on Tuesday, before recording this, the Cubs reportedly agreed to a deal with Shota Imanja, 30-year-old left-hander from Japan who was posted and needed to sign this week. Pretty good starter, pretty solid mid-rotation guy. Their rotation is shaping up to be pretty good with guys like Justin Steele, who was fantastic last year, Cy Young dark horse, Jamison Tyone, who they have a lot of money wrapped up in, Shota Imanja, Kyle Hendricks is still there, and Jordan Wicks. They still have Javier Assad. And then they've got guys who can be coming up this year, like Ben Brown, Caleb Killian, Hayden Wisniewski, who they still like a lot. The Cubs probably could still add a starter. They could get some insurance for Kyle Hendricks, who's been hurt himself. But I don't know if Shane Bieber is really much insurance for him, considering his injury history the last 3 years, being hurt the last 3 years. And, Hendricks was pretty good when he was healthy last year. He did throw 137 innings, and they were pretty good ones. So the Cubs may not choose to take that risk. So the suitors for Shane Bieber out there, that there were any, seem to be dwindling right now. And I think it just makes sense for Cleveland to hold on to Shane Bieber because, the options clearly are, as we've said time and time again, he pitches well and he rebuilds his value for July and you make a trade and you get a little more than you would get right now if he's going well, or if you're playing well, you don't trade him. Hopefully he's pitching well. And then, you hopefully make the playoffs and you give him the qualifying offer at the end of the year and that's it. The downside is if he gets hurt or doesn't pitch effectively, and all those options kind of go out the window. I sort of wonder if it is like the third option there, that would Cleveland and Shane Bieber kind of reach a 1 year deal for 2025 that, would be beneficial to both parties, where they bring him back with one more chance to bet on himself and, get 1 more year out of him and see what happens. But, because I don't know what the pitching depth will look like a year from now, but option number one certainly is the best option for them. He pitches well and they're either winning or they can find a trade partner for him in July. But I know I saw a report the other day saying the Yankees have checked in on Bieber, but honestly, Carlos Rodon and Nestor Cortez both had injuries last year. They're projected fifth starter right now, and roster resource isn't always, accurate with this stuff, but right now their fifth starter looks like Clayton Beeter, who I think is more of a reliever personally. I do like the arm, but they certainly could use a fifth starter. But, are they going to re-sign Jordan Montgomery? Are they going to bring him back again? Blake Snell is still out there. Supposedly Blake Snell wants to play for New York, but people have said that New York is not as interested. Marcus Stroman's still out there, but there's a beef going on between those two. So who really knows? They could go out and make a trade for Dylan Cease certainly as well. Wouldn't shock me. So I think, the Yankees have options as well to go out and add a starter, not named Shane Bieber, and not take that risk. And I just don't see a match on the Yankees roster for Cleveland in terms of a trade for what they're going to want. I just don't see a pitcher coming back that makes sense for them. I don't see an outfielder, an everyday starter. I did check in with a friend who is kind of a secondhand source in Chicago for the Cubs. And, this is nothing new. People have reported this in the past. Reporters who have, real connections and have a lot more knowledge than we do. But, had said that obviously there have been talks between the Guardians and the Cubs regarding Bieber, and that Christopher Morel's name had been thrown around a little bit. And normally I don't like to comment on some of the fake trades made by some of the outlets because they just are, in theory, they just don't really work to me. But I saw Bleacher Report had one the other day, which usually I don't have a whole lot of, I don't get a whole lot of value out of what they write in terms of trade proposals and things like that. But one of them was Shane Bieber and Trevor Stephan for Christopher Morel. And earlier in the offseason, I said, when I heard that Christopher Morel was someone that Cubs fans and the Cubs had pitched as a return for Bieber, but it would have to take Bieber plus. I thought, well, Christopher Morel doesn't really fit what Cleveland has been trying to do. He strikes out too much, doesn't hold any defensive value. It's an aggressive profile. I don't think there's a match there. But if you look back now at Cleo Watson and Davison De Los Santos and Estevan Florial, I think Cleveland's starting to bend a little bit in terms of their philosophy. And, they're not going crazy. It's not like they're going out there and completely changing away from the contact heavy approach that they have on their roster. But I think they are doing a better job of looking at the way to supplement that and diversify their offensive skill sets where they can, where it makes sense, take some gambles here and there, and they have done that. Morel would make sense in this return. And when I saw the Bieber Stephan proposal for Morel, I thought, well, the reason this trade hasn't been made is because the Cubs wouldn't do it, and I wouldn't either. I think it would be a great idea to turn a relief asset like Trevor Stephan at 28, and a guy like Bieber whose value is taking a little bit, and turn him into an everyday right fielder like Christopher Morel. As aggressive as he is, but he's young, and I think you can find a defensive home for him. So that trade wasn't going to get made, but I think that the Cubs are less likely than they were before, and I think it would take more than Bieber and Stephan to get that done. But that's just an idea of what I think Cleveland's looking for is a guy like Christopher Morel in a trade, is what I would guess. I don't see the Dodgers as a fit. I know people have thrown out the Dodgers, and I think any trade really at this point, if it involves Bieber, is going to have to involve an extra piece for Cleveland to sweeten the pot, and I don't see them doing that. And I certainly don't see the Emmanuel Clase piece of that coming in. I know if some people pitch that out there, doesn't make any sense to me at all. Cleveland would not. Look, Emmanuel Clase has got a ton of value on his own. They don't want to attach that to Bieber just to move him. I would think that's pretty unlikely. I think it's unlikely that Clase gets traded on his own to begin with this offseason unless they get a crazy offer. I don't think they need to add him to Bieber to complicate things to that. I think Clase would be a deal on his own, and it's not going to happen. But I think, it's very possible. I think it's more likely than not that at this point, Bieber's coming to spring training as a Guardian. And we'll see what happens there. And that could be a good thing because really, if he's healthy, this is a good pitching rotation. It's maybe one of the best in baseball if he's healthy. If him and Tristan McKenzie are both healthy coming in 2024, which by all accounts, they've had normal off seasons. They seem like they're ready to go for 2024. This could be a really good pitching rotation. And I know Cleveland's got to help add to their offense. But there are things that could happen. I mean, there's a lot of outcomes they need to go right. But if you look at, Naylor and Ramirez and Kwan and Kyle Manzardo and Bo Naylor, a full season to him, and Andres Jimenez getting back to at least a league average bat, you've got some pieces there to make this offense, I don't know, league at like middle of the pack. Can you get in the middle of the pack the offense? If the bullpen returns to form a little bit and you have a healthy rotation, it only takes probably 85 wins to win this division. All those things I said, if they click again like they did in 2022, they could easily be winning the division again. I know it's not the goal, but you get a healthy rotation like that, like I just mentioned, it could be one of the best rotations in the American League if all those guys are healthy. And, development is never linear with rookies in terms of pitchers and second-year pitchers at that, so there could be growing pains for Bidey, Williams, and Allen. But, if you have guys like Bieber and McKenzie that help them lead them and stabilize things, it could be very good. And all you need maybe is a league average offense and a little bit of returning luck to the bullpen to get back to the playoffs and, see what happens. Maybe you get to the World Series somehow and you get to go face the Dodgers, who will knock you out with their deferred money championship. All right, speaking of deferred money, we'll just give a quick update on the TV contract issue again, and we'll end the show with some fun draft data to keep us warm on a cold and wet day in Northeast Ohio. All right. Speaking of being under the weather, I was under the weather last week. Jeff had to do a solo show without me, and that's because I had a sinus infection. And look, I paid for it dearly. I had to pay a good amount of money, even with insurance, to go to urgent care to get sinus infection looked at. And I had to make sure it wasn't COVID. I wanted to make sure it wasn't the flu or strep. But I wasn't feeling great, and I needed some quick relief because I wasn't sleeping. If I had a Jace case, which I should, because we've got a great offer here at the Locked On Sports Network to get a Jace case where you can get a pack of 5 different antibiotics to treat a long list of bacterial illnesses, including UTIs, respiratory infections, sinusitis, which I had, skin infections, and other things, all that stuff that can happen to us. Maybe you've got a kid sick, it's winter. Supply chain issues could keep some medications out of pharmacies, could be hard to find. Maybe you don't want to run out to a pharmacy. Maybe the weather's bad because it's been bad in Northeast Ohio the last couple of days. And we're right in the middle of the sick season right now. All the germs are going around. Save some money and get yourself a Jace case. Don't be like me. You have a Jace case around, it can save you money from going to that urgent care and paying that copay. And you can have 5 different antibiotics in that Jace case ready to go if your kid's sick, if you're sick, and help you save some money and help you get some quick relief right at home. So visit jacemedical.com and complete your physician encounter. It'll be reviewed by a board-certified physician. Your medications will be dispensed by a licensed pharmacy at a fraction of a regular cost. Never been more important to be prepared than today. So go to jacemedical.com and use our offer code LOCKEDON to get $20 off your order. All right, well, one thing that is not healthy right now is the TV deal in baseball. And just for the 11 teams that are still under the thumb of the Diamond Sports Group, honestly, this is embarrassing at this point. It's so embarrassing. So the next hearing in the bankruptcy saga of Diamond Sports Group, which is Bally's, was supposed to be today, January 10th, as you're listening to this. And it's been delayed 9 days. It'll happen January 19th. And both sides have been mediating and, going through different negotiations for how this is going to end up. Obviously, Diamond Sports Group wants to drop the Texas Rangers and the Cleveland Guardians from their coverage this season. And part of this is what's fueling a slow offseason. I don't know. I was going to say maybe Cleveland actually makes some more moves once they get some clarity on their TV situation. I don't know if they will. I don't know if that necessarily is going to happen. But, they are waiting for clarity on their TV deal. It's a real big pain. They don't have any clarity on how much it's going to be. Whatever they get is going to be less than they were supposed to be owed. So they know that for sure, but they want the clarity in the payroll. Like any business with a budget, you got to know how much you're getting in revenue from these streams before you can set a real good budget and know what to spend. And in Major League Baseball, look, spending is a whole different issue. I could have a whole 20-minute rant on this because I'm kind of frustrated in Major League Baseball at this point. But I'm frustrated at the TV deal. This is $1 billion business with, millionaire executives working in Major League Baseball who were not proactive to the cord cutting issue and the bankruptcy that was coming on hard from DSG and Bally's in this terrible deal they made in the first place. All these guys are paid big money, these big executives in $1 billion corporation that should have seen this coming, honestly. If you're smart at business and you follow the trends, everybody has been predicting this. Outside the sources of Major League Baseball, reporters were reporting this. They knew the data, so the people in Major League Baseball had this data, and they weren't proactive. Did nothing about it. It's terrible, and they're allowing teams to, be hurt by this. Like Cleveland, it's already an unfair game in terms of financials as it is. Even though Cleveland could afford to spend more than they are, they still can't compete with the Joneses out there out west, and this TV deal is not helping them. All right, let's have some fun before we get out of here the last couple minutes. I don't want to give the whole scoop away because Baseball America does a great job. You should subscribe. I love their draft content. They had a great article today, though, looking at some of the really fun data points in the college hitter draft class. So they looked at contact rate, exit velocity, and chase rate, which are all big indicators for hitters. Some really fun data points. And all I came away with was making the case for Nick Kurtz. So if you're watching on YouTube, again, I've got some of the data points on the bottom of the screen. Nick Kurtz, 14.9% chase rate. a contact rate just under 80%, and a 90th percentile exit velocity of 108.9. Some of the best data you're going to find. He's got power. He doesn't chase. He makes enough contact. Just makes the case for number one. If I'm going 1B, Travis Bazzana is on there at 14.7 chase rate, so very close with Nick Kurtz. The exit velocity is a little bit lower at 105.9, but the contact rate is 86.3, so that's why he's my 1B. JJ Weatherhold, who everyone wants to mock to Cleveland, 18.4% chase rate, so higher than Kurtz, higher than Bazzana. Contact rate is the highest, almost 90%, so that's why people think Cleveland will want him. And then 105.1 90th exit velocity percentile, so lower than the first two there. That's why I think Cleveland's sort of changing their model, and I think Kurtz fits the sweet spot of looking for better power and more athleticism, and less worried about overall contact rate. Other names to keep an eye on that I saw in here was Cole Mathis, who I thought stood out. He is from the College of Charleston, has some good Cape data. Nobody really knows where he ends up playing, but he is a two-way guy, so there is that. Good athlete, very good chase rate numbers, very good contact numbers, very good exit velocity. The other ones on there that I thought were also interesting were Jack Caglione, but if you're watching on YouTube, again, a 40.9% chase rate, it's really high. It's really up there. Carson Benj and Charlie Condon are two names to watch. I thought were interesting data points on there. Make sure you check out Baseball America. Good data there. I'll quickly share some of the data plots on the screen for you there. But I would check that article out. They've got some really good data on there. Again, it just makes the case for Nick Kurtz for me a little bit more, I would say. But Travis Bazzana, Cole Mathis, Carson Benj, all other names that look really good on that list as well. Who else looks good? You look good for watching the show today and watching the show this long. Jeff will be back with me later in the week. We've got Let's Make a Deal with the NL and AL West teams, position reviews for outfield, and relief pitching from 2023, everyone's favorite positions from the last year. That'll be a fun one to review. So stick with us later in the week. Thank you for watching today, and make sure you download, subscribe, rate, review, all that good stuff, and go Guardians, go.